and it has like about a 20-second delay, 30-second delay. So I'm just going to wait for it to show up on the Facebook group to make sure that everything's functioning right. And boom, there it goes. So we're good to go. We are live on Facebook, and super excited. This is Jason with Healthcare Entrepreneur Academy, and on the call here with me, I have Erik, and Erik is the CEO and founder of Immertec. He has 10 years of experience in forging international business relationships. He actually started his first venture when he was 14, and we'll talk a little bit about that. He's doing some amazing things in the healthcare space. And so super excited to have you, Erik. Thanks for joining us. And if you can, I'll just have you give a quick little bit of information on how the listeners can get in touch with you if they're interested. I like to do that right up front so people don't have to wait till the end. So if they want to find out more about you, what's the best place for them to do that?
Yeah, so that's all. Thank you very much for having me. First of all, really excited to participate in this. So if someone wants to reach out to us, for sure, they can go to our website, which is www.immertec.com. And as well as if they have any specific questions or they have some ideas around business development, either they can BD at Immertec or questions at Immertec. Both of them would be directed to the right person to answer those questions. But we look forward to hearing from anyone that would like to reach out.
Perfect. Thank you. And then your favorite social media platform that you can be reached on? I know you're on LinkedIn. I know you're on Facebook. Is there a certain favorite place that you have to get?
So personally, LinkedIn is the one business professionally that I'm kind of pushing everything towards, because I really, especially in business development and in the fact that we're B2B and the nature of our business, I think LinkedIn's a great one. Personally, Instagram.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
I'm actually myself. I'm kind of new to Instagram, so I'm gonna find you on there and start following you.
Yeah, likewise.
Cool. So I guess we'll kind of just get started, and I guess I like to kind of break the ice with the audience, and you know, some people think that healthcare entrepreneurs are like some sort of superior human beings, and that they just grew up like excelling at absolutely everything. That they started, you know, their entrepreneurial life when they were kids. In fact, you actually did, but not everybody does. So kind of like, where did you grow up? What was it like? Just kind of run us through that and give us a little bit of an idea of what your background's like.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm originally from New Hampshire, from Goffstown, New Hampshire. It's a small town outside of Manchester, about 45 minutes from Boston.
Okay.
I'm first generation Peruvian, but I grew up in the States, very close to my family and my roots. I was very fortunate in that my mother was I come from a very well educated family in South America, and she always taught me all of our conversations were around learning and just really putting yourself out there in the world, and I really appreciate that. I got as you said, the entrepreneurial bug. I got bit quite early. I was actually watching a movie, and I saw an ice cream truck come by, and like the sound, the whole typical you can imagine. I actually ironically don't remember what movie it was, but whatever. The point is that I saw that and I said, you know what, I would pay whatever price for an ice cream if there was a truck to come by, and I had never seen one in my life. And so I started to do some research around this, and I had, at that time, it was like the Yellow Book, so I'm aging myself, right? But I was like looking through, and I found in Massachusetts a place that you could go. And so I talked to this guy on the phone for about 2 weeks about the whole process. And he was giving me all the information, and then he goes to the end of his sales cycle, that 2-week time period, like calls every few days. And he's like, all right, let me get your credit card so we can get a deposit. I'm like, credit card? I'm only 14 years old. So he thought, he was like, what? He was pretty upset about that. And I said, well, hold on. Must be a solution to this. And I said, well, how old am I supposed to be? And he's like, call me in 4 years. You're very upset. And I was like, no. I'm going to call you tomorrow, right? Just promise me that you'll answer tomorrow. So then I went, and I had this neighbor who had dropped out of high school, and his parents were very upset with him, and I knew that. He couldn't get a job, and he was just like living off them. And I said, hey, look, I'll pay you $100 a day. All you got to do is to go to the city hall. We're going to pull a hawkers and peddlers license in your name, and then you're going to drive. And so I actually wrote out this little contract on a piece of paper, and then he agreed to it. So we both signed it, and then we went to get a hawkers and peddlers license. And then I called the guy. I told him, I said, I'm coming over with an 18-year-old. He's going to put it in his name. He's going to drive. And then we came back with the truck, and we started working. And I was making around $5,000 a day selling ice cream, right? Because you're buying them for like 30 to 75 cents and selling for $5, right? That was, for a 14-year-old, was like, oh my God, you can just find a problem in the world and then go after a solution and just take action, and you're going to make something happen. And so that was kind of what really created this urge to constantly like disrupt the things and look for opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I can totally relate to that a little bit. I definitely had a lemonade stand back in the day. One thing that you mentioned is that looking for problems and solving them, which is like key to being an entrepreneur, right? Like that's like the whole idea, the whole goal. If you can find a problem and create a solution, then you have a business. And so there's like opportunities all around you. Like if anybody's looking for ideas, just think about any sort of issue that you're facing, like in everyday life, right? Or on your job or whatever. There's tons of different problems that you run into every day, and you could create the next amazing solution. And Eric's clearly started doing that at age of 14, which is super impressive. So as far as like, so you started that when you were 14. What was kind of your next path? I know you were in the military. So what was your next step from being the Actually, real quick, let me ask you another question. How did you exit that business?
How did I exit it? It's kind of funny. So, so first of all, it was great making all this money. It was a good thing and a bad thing because at a young age, I came into way more money than a 14-year-old should ever have, right? And then I thought that it kind of got to my head a little bit, and I'm like, oh, and so I ended up dropping out of school, and then I was like, forget school. Like, this is all I need. And then I got a rude awakening, because guess what happens when you have a business model that makes you a bunch of money, and then everybody watches a 14-year-old make a bunch of money. Then the next year you got 7 ice cream trucks that are competing. So I learned that in business, you really need to identify what your competitive advantage is, and know that, like, it was a good learning lesson for me. So in the end of I didn't do it I did it for in the first part of the next year, but then it was like it didn't make as much sense as it did, right? And then I was looking for other entrepreneurial ideas. I ended up going to Europe and just backpacking around Europe when I was and then saw the world was really big, and came back and said, you know what, I'm going to go to school. I did full-time day school, summer school, night school. Took 2 years. So I, like, essentially, to put it into perspective, 14, you're just getting into high school, right? Yeah. So I had 0 credits when I was 17, right? And then I did it all. And I got all of my credits from 17 to 19, and I wanted more discipline, so I joined the Marine Corps I figured that I knew that the world was big, and in order for me to kind of go to college, and I need to build more discipline and things like that. So when I joined the Marine Corps, was a great experience for me. I did a year in Iraq where I did 11,000 miles in 9 months. Very humbling experience. Definitely, it definitely builds character to be in combat. And then from there, I applied for embassy duty, and I did embassy duty around the world. And then I periodically augmented White House and President Bush's security, like in the Olympics in 2008, and then Sharm el-Sheikh in different places. When I was there, I'm thinking, like, okay, I'm getting out. I'm going to go to school, get my education, and then I'm going to do business. And so I'll wait, because I think you're going to ask me a question about a failure. I'll tell you my first business after that. Okay. But just to answer the question, that's kind of what took where I went from there. So I learned that you need to. I learned that competition is a real thing, and the minute that you start to make money, that people are going to come along and copy you. And I also learned that you can't let things get to your head, right? It's irrelevant how much money you're making, right? It's about the problem that you're solving and what you're doing. And so that was a humbling experience.
Yeah, that's great advice. And thank you for your service, by the way. I've actually, I'm in the Navy Reserves myself, and I've assigned to a Marine Corps unit for a little bit. And I absolutely loved working with you guys. Like, the amount of discipline that you guys show compared to any other branches that I've been involved with is just like way above anybody else. So thanks again for your service. We do definitely appreciate that.
Sometimes it's too much.
What's that?
Sometimes it's too much. I think that it's a little bit difficult. I watch, because I'm in the Marine Corps. It's like, oh, you're doing this thing wrong, right? Yeah. With the hand pointed like that, we call this knife hand, right? You lock your body. You're doing this wrong. This is what you need to correct now. Boom, 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 boom. Don't give me any excuses. But that doesn't really work in reality. So it's kind of a hard thing to flip that and change it. I think it's so important to develop your communication skills. But like you said, that work ethic is great to have, and it's something they teach you. You can do anything, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So during your time at the Marines, were you like having entrepreneurial ideas? Or did you just kind of put that on the back burner and were focused on surviving and functioning in the military?
So I had, and this is because the whole point of this podcast is to give meaty, things that are going to really help people with their entrepreneurial pursuits from our conversations. And so I didn't put anything on the back burner. I did what I did was I'm not good enough. I need to educate myself. So I would study. I invested in real estate, but not right after the crash, and I bought 5 apartments in St. Pete. That's why I moved there and went to school there. So I did take action in that sense, but I think I spent way too many years thinking that I didn't know enough instead of realizing that life is about momentum. That's the force that you want to leverage. And it's so key in order to take action constantly. And that the best way to learn is on the court, not on the bleachers. Right. And then I read books, I read between 1 to 2 books a week. I specifically ask myself before, what's the outcome of reading this book? Is this book just to add to knowledge, or is this book something I'm tackling today or tomorrow or next week? Right. And I read the books that I'm tackling today in line. Right. And so I think that is definitely something that I learned in the Marine Corps, because I spent like 4 years just reading everything about being an entrepreneur. Right.
Yeah,
but also it's kind of like a prison sentence. So, so you do. So when you're going to work out and read books. So I guess it wasn't that bad. But
I totally agree. Like the best way to learn is actually like get in the trenches and get in there and get your hands dirty, because like I'm working at my MBA right now and I've got 2 classes left. And to be honest with you, I don't find it to be terribly useful, as far as the majority of the information. Now I can apply it like as I'm learning it. But when I first started, I didn't have a business. And so I didn't, it's hard to retain and kind of take what you're learning and apply it if you don't really have a business or you're not getting your hands dirty. So I think that's really good advice. Like you really learn a ton being in the trenches. Like I think more than an MBA actually provides. I've learned more from reading, talking to super successful people like yourself, and studying and taking online courses, like not collegiate courses, but like courses from experts. And so it's a new sort of paradigm to learning now that we're in the 2019. But yeah, totally hands-on learning is the way to go. I totally agree with you there. So once you
and I would caveat, if you don't mind, I'll caveat on what you just said. Yeah. Like, the huge thing I've realized is like the traditional education system was for a reason, to create workers, right? Where it was like very task oriented, and you push someone to being able to achieve a task, how to memorize something. And I really think the Montessorian for children, where it's like very executive level. It's like there's unemployment for people who make 6 figures is less than 1%. Right? It's the best in the world, right? So the problem is that we're just our education system, including our higher level educations, like even the master's program, is geared towards like storing a bunch of information in your computer instead of allowing you to identify, when I come across this problem, what's the course of action? And it's not usually ask somebody's advice. How many times do you find people that are like, they can Google search something and really just attack a problem, and that they go to someone to ask for that, and I think that's kind of something I've kind of redefined, or some type of in the education system. And people are going to the untraditional, like Udemy, like you said, those type of courses that are going to allow you to find the tools you need and just take action. Awesome.
Yeah, thanks for rephrasing that. You did it much more eloquently than I did, but that's exactly the point I was trying to get across. So thank you. So when are you sort of your next step? You left the military and you did a little bit of real estate. You went back to school, right? You got 2 bachelor's degrees, right? And then you finished those. And then what entrepreneurial step did you take next?
Okay, cool. This is awesome. So this question, what did I do next, is like the failure. And we talked about this, that I was actually excited. No one's asked me yet. You'll be the first person in the questions that you'd said in advance. Like, tell me about your failures, right? So the next thing I did, it's embarrassing, but hilarious at the same time. So do you know what a double-decker bus is?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like a Bristol Decker 1965 double-decker bus, right? So I, for some reason, felt that I was going, why my business ventures in my early ages had to do with wheels, I don't know. But I decided that the strategy was going to be like not a party bus, but like a special events bus that was unique and that was one of these. And I purchased one from Cupertino, California, literally a mile away from Apple, right? And these things, you got to remember, it was built in 1965. It had like a retrofitted engine in it. It had no power steering and wheel. And I drove it all the way by myself from California to Florida, right? And I mean, this thing was driving on the other side of the road, like you're in England, right?
Yep.
30,000 pounds, right? With a brake system that would essentially take, like, if I didn't see that the car was stopped, like I could have killed 100 people on the way, right? I do not know. I barely know how I survived, but I did that. And another little note is that if anything were to happen mechanically, right, there's no way to put it on a tow truck because it's 13 and a half feet tall, which means it would make it under no bridges. It would hit everything up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was only one option. And so but anyway, so I bought this thing foolishly, drove it all the way across the country, somehow survived, and then got there, and then spent like what I had budgeted was money that I had saved from the Marine Corps in order to like start this business right away. And I under budgeted, which is something that another piece of advice I expect for people. A lot of people think in terms of number, and you always try to think conservative, right? And so when you're trying to create a budget in order, or you're trying to raise money for a business or something that you're trying to do, you should always overestimate what your expenses are going to be and underestimate what your potential revenues are going to be. And if you're going to go to an investor and you're trying to raise money on a business, that you should know in advance that, like, if you're going to someone and asking for a very small, it's actually more risky to them than if you were going to ask for a lot, right? Because people realistically know what can be done with the amount of money you have. So in return, so what happened with me there is that, like, I didn't evaluate properly what it was going to cost, and so I spent all this money and got halfway through a project. Right, halfway through a project does not get you any revenue, and so I put myself in a very difficult situation, and I got down to a point where I only had $5,000 left, and so I I went through depression phase for a little bit, like what happened here? I'm a failure. And then I learned from those mistakes, and then I started to do education on, like, what's an actual business that anyone can do and that I can learn from. So I took $5,000, the remaining money I had, I got on a plane, I went right back to China, and I started a private label brand that was based on, meeting certain requirements like search volume, product size, weight, all these things. And then I would have I hired Filipinos in order to go all over the internet and just scrape every review and then identify, like, 70% of people said that this product would be better if it had longer handles. And then when I'm going to China, guess what I'm asking for? This product with longer handles. And then when I come back to sell it online, what am I describing it as? Long handle this product, right?
That's genius.
And so I just leveraged I went back to the roots of what I had realized. Like, you identify a problem. And how do you identify a problem? Is you listen to the people that are telling you what their problems are, right? And reviews are free. They're out there, right? And you can really track this. And then after that, I was kind of aware of a problem. I like learning, and I like figuring out strategies. But what I don't like is doing something repetitive over and over again, right? So instead of feeling bad and trying to figure that out, like meditation, whatever, to get myself to do more repetitive stuff, I was aware of that, and I created a training studios where once I found something that I could monetize, I would create a small video on it, and then I would put it into a video library, and I would hire a Filipino, and I'd say, look, just do this one video. When you can do this better than anyone in the world, right, and you feel comfortable, you can do the second video. When you can do 10 videos, then I'll give you a 25-cent raise. By the time they could get $4 an hour, which was like big money for someone in the Philippines, they could run my entire business without ever asking me a question, right? And so I basically automated the whole business, and then in 2 years, I got it from $5K investment with no outside investment or loans to 7 figures in sales. And then recently, I got it under contract for an exit from a Canadian barbecue company.
That's awesome. That's what the company was, right? It was selling all different barbecue products.
It's barbecue accessories, yeah. Which I don't even barbecue, ironically. I really don't.
Yeah, that's crazy. So you don't even have to do what your business is about, like, necessarily, and you can still be uber successful. That's great advice too that you gave as far as like sort of automating everything and like being able to remove yourself from the business, right? Like that's really important when it comes to wanting to sell the business, because an investor or a potential purchaser is not really going to be too interested if they're going to have to take over the business and then have, they just purchased themselves a full-time job or plus. So being able to have everything automated is key to having a good exit, and it's key to a good lifestyle too, right?
Yeah. And then, by the way, removing yourself in two ways, because this is something this is what I had learned from the bus. Like in the ice cream truck, it worked for me because why did I make the decision for ice cream truck? Because we are all like, we're born into this world very egotistical. A baby worries about why they're not getting a piece of pizza instead of like when someone else got a piece of pizza, right? Well, we're all just kind of big babies most of our life. And so I was like, I want ice cream. I love sugar. Why would someone else not love sugar? And then in the bus, I was like, oh, I love these British buses. I've seen them since I was a kid. Everyone would love to do that. And so the biggest learning lesson I got from that was take myself out of the equation. And I got into a business that I didn't care about. And I said, well, if you take yourself out of the equation and you're looking to solve a problem, then what are you doing? You're doing it from empathy, right? And that's the best place to start anywhere, right? And so and you're saying, okay, well, what are the things and so I created what I called my girlfriend list, right? Of this is the products that I'm like, first I identified, obviously, it's very obvious that people want products. Life is about, delivering products, and services are products. And I picked products in that case. And I identified like what that product looked like in advance. And then I sent out people to research and just come back with what is going to meet these requirements, like weight, size, number of volume of searches, etc. And it was just like a requirement. So it was like, and that's how I took myself. I used an analytical approach in order to take myself out of the equation. And that's kind of like where success came from, right? And then, so that's kind of just a little thing that I think is also important, is to take yourself out of the equation as much as possible. It's hard because you want to be passionate about it. But be passionate about helping people.
Yep. Cool. Awesome advice. So when it comes to like exiting, do you have any, what's that process sort of look like? And do you have any tips for anybody who is in the phase of wanting to exit or potentially exiting in the near future?
Yeah. So first of all, your goal should probably not be an exit, but you should have an exit in mind. What does that mean? We have, so in the specific, we're a Delaware C Corp, Silicon Valley Bank. We debuted our technology at Facebook headquarters in Menlo Park in 2017 and kind of put ourselves on a trajectory. And it's a software company, so it's like the exit looks a little bit different than, for instance, my other business, which is an e-commerce play. So it's like identifying that early on. I will say this, that I did learn early on, and I learned from the ice cream truck as well, is that anything you do in life, or at least this is my opinion, right, should be creating value for the future. Right. And so if you do a business that is going to just bring in money, that's great, but you're just creating a job for yourself. So then, which is okay if that's what your goal is. So as you said, if an exit is what you're looking for, then you should pencil out what that looks like. So in the case of my barbecue company, then it's an e-commerce play. So it's 4 times the free cash, right? It's 4 times what you pay yourself in salary, right? What your net income at the end of the year is, and then any interest or taxes that you pay. You add those back in, multiply that by 4, and you know what your company's worth. Then you just decide, what's that number? Where is that number where I feel comfortable? Is it $1 million? Is it $2 million? And then you can work backwards and find out what you need to do today to get to that point, right? And then that's like what I call creating your outcome, right? So most people, and it's a huge problem, is that they don't create their outcome. Right? You should always, every meeting that you go into, what's my outcome in this meeting? Is my outcome to be right? Which usually is what people, by the way, I found that if you don't create, you're always going to have an outcome, because our subconscious mind's much stronger than anything. I mean, we got 3 ounces of frontal cortex right there, right? And if your amygdala is not hijacking you and making you kind of do on your working on your emotions, and like you usually have to plan it in advance to know that, and then you can win. So like usually, you should be like connecting with another human being is usually probably what a strong outcome, and then for what purpose, right? Otherwise, you'll end up focusing on being right, which gets in the way sometimes, right? And so I think that if you have an exit, identify what that looks like. So right now in our current business, my co-founder and I have already sat down. We went through an exit, a concept. We want it to be above this number. That's going to be X times EBITDA. Then we also in order for that to happen, and we need to have this many employees. We need to have, so you start with the number, right? Which sounds like almost, It sounds like the wrong place because to start, but you start with a number and then you work backwards by looking at comparables. You can go to Crunchbase. You can go to, there's lots of places online, right? And you just use that data to understand, like, what did a company look like that had a $100 million exit, right?
Mhm.
Did they have 25 employees? Did they have 150 employees, right? What were those employees doing, right? How many senior level executives did they have, right? What was their earnings? What did their earnings look like, right? What round did they get to? What type of venture capitalists did they have involved with them? What type of people did they have on their board, right? What type of people did they have as advisors to their company, right? And then you look at those things, and then you can emulate or surpass that in order to get to that goal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So beginning with the end in mind is sort of summing it down to, I guess, the basic level, like most basic level. Great advice right there. When it comes to,
But by the way, can I say one last thing about that?
yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, I want to say one last comment about that. I know I just used money because money is a part of it, but it's very important that that you understand there's got to be a why. Okay, money is real, right? It's fiat. It's not connected to anything. It's not connected to gold. It's not. So if your goal is $100 million to have $100 million, that's not a very good outcome, right? Your goal, I think, a goal for an exit that's stronger is have a clear exit, right? That you have capitalized on, so that you can continue throughout your life to do multiple startups and then be able to, with less friction, right? For instance, going like one of our early investors who invested $500,000 based on us, right, has watched us over a year go from ideation to product MVP to debut at Facebook to patents to product market fit with Johnson & Johnson to scale. Like, he's watched all this in a short period of time. He's literally told me, he's like, look, I'm just going to invest in whatever you do next, right? So it's like you want to build like that. That should be a strong. You should be setting yourself up in order to solve problems, right, in the future. And that should be like something. Maybe that's what it is for me, at least, right? Setting myself up to be able to do what I love is to constantly disrupt and then influence people in order to follow me into new businesses in the future, whether they're investors, whether they're employees, whether they're advisors, whether they're board members, whatever they are. I want people to, and proven success is the number one way to do that, right? Not money, right? Because there's a lot of people with a lot of money that no one wants to follow.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Go ahead.
What I was going to say was that sort of what we wanted to do is as far as the next step in your phase of your entrepreneurial life, like what was the next step from this point? What was the next business? Do you want to kind of get into? I think the next business was Immertec, right? You want to kind of go into that a little bit and kind of explain what the initial starting point was for that business and why you decided to get into that, where the idea came from, and sort of how it evolved.
Yeah, for sure. So Immertec, it was, first of all, my partner's not here right now to represent, right? He's actually in Texas setting up a new tech site, and they're doing surgeries today, multiple surgeries. But he's a huge part of this. So I had met him early on, and we were close. He helped me with some automation software in my previous business. Right away, I knew that he would be a great partner to have. He had amazing EQ, very talented, kind of the opposite. I'm very passionate and a lot of conviction and very focused on the business development, customer acquisition, all this. And he's very technical, very calm, even keel. And so, but you can't just be partners with somebody if you don't have any idea. He in 2012 got one of the first headsets from the Kickstarter campaign from the Oculus, and in 2016 when Mark Zuckerberg purchased the Oculus, for $2 billion after only $7 million in sales, he's like, whoa, this is going to be something serious, right? Yeah. And so he had been playing with it, and he's like, look, now it's time to dive deep in and put full resources into this. And so we had aligned and spoke about. Excuse me 1 second. I want to ask, can you shut off the AC because it's probably making back noise? Yeah, so we had talked about this, and he brought it up, and we looked at I did a deep dive into the industry, and we aligned on two really core principles. Like, if we're going to go after this, we're talking about virtual reality in the beginning, right? Now it's ironic because we realize now we're really a health tech solution that happens to use virtual reality, right? But in the beginning, the opportunity we saw was in virtual reality, right? Is that VR was going to be way more than video games and cheap experiences, right? That similar to the way that computers, the internet, and cell phones were disrupted business first. Like the first use cases were in business to get over like the customer adoption and the licensee costs around implementing these type of technologies. We knew that the same thing was going to happen in virtual reality, right? So then again, we leveraged information out there, which I'd done in the past with the virtual realities and the reviews. He said, well, how do we do this? Get really some serious research and understanding what are ways that this medium was going to disrupt them and potential business industries. And Goldman Sachs, Citibank, all these different reports were coming out talking like $1 trillion industry, $80 billion, multiple. And I didn't care about the numbers, but what I cared about was that those are SEC-backed companies that can't just put out arbitrary information. So we like looked into that and the resources. We read so many reports that it was a little bit overwhelming at some points, right?
Yeah.
And we identified multiple potential use cases. One right away that stood out to us was training, right? And then we looked, okay, what does it take to do training in virtual reality? And we saw that all the training was done in one of two ways, right? Either it was made like making a video game or like the movie Avatar, so CGI and graphics, and which would take like between 6 months to a year, sometimes 2 years, depending on how complex it is. Or it's done like making a movie like Waterworld, right, with a large budget and pre-production, production, and post-production, right? And that the way we looked at it and said, like, look, in order to create business value, these things have to happen at the speed of business, right? And that's not 1 year of planning and compliance and all the other stuff that's involved with it. It's like what we're doing right now, right? You would like to disrupt the way that people are trained, or at least give people different perspectives on starting a business in the healthcare space, right? What better way than to leverage real-time communications where we can interact back and forth, and then people can view this, right? Then if you had to do for the production on all this every single time, it would probably get overwhelming and costly and make it even more difficult to fulfill on, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
And so what we did was we began to build all the tools around doing that, right? And at the time, in order to make 3D, which is an important aspect of it, because if you're watching 2D, like you see 360 2D out there, if you're watching that, your brain has a biological response in order to feel sick, because it says there's something wrong with the world. You must eat some bad food and you should vomit. And so to make 3D, it takes 5 hours to make 1 minute of video, right? And so with our technology, we built out all of up until about mid 2017, we built out everything, all the components. There's about 7 different components in order to not only create fully immersive 3D but to deliver that in less than 200 milliseconds. So put that into perspective, the streaming that we're doing right now has 7 to 15 seconds. Like you said, it takes a couple seconds in order to start, right? What we do in the operating room is less than 200 milliseconds. And that also includes, like, we take the endoscopy and the navigator and the CT scan and any one of the feeds from the Stryker equipments or any equipment in the operating room, and we allow them to overlay that information. So for instance, a doctor who is remoting in to train on a unique procedure happening in, for instance, Texas, can use the controller, and he can grab the endoscopy and he can put it in that perfect position so that he can see the physician's hands, his endoscope, and the feed at the same time, right? Which, based on feedback from the physicians who have trained, is actually something better than the traditional method where they give up 2 days of potential earnings and family time in order to get on a plane. Because in a real operating room, not only are you there with like 4 or 5 surgeries trying to watch this 10-minute surgery, but you have to look up to the left to see the monitor to see what's happening with endoscopy, and then back to the person's hands, and then back and forth. And it's just a more difficult way to learn.
That's super impressive. That's a really amazing use for the technology. I can just see this going so many different places, like not even just the operating room, just everything in the hospitals. As far as training goes, what's the equipment like that you had to sort of create or find in order to make all this sort of come together? That's probably a huge process and pretty technical.
Yeah, it's very technical. So there's 2 things to what you said. So first of all, is like what you had said about there's so many different ways that this could have gone. 100%. And that this is another, like, this is about pearls, right? Whatever it's worth. That's something that we struggled with early on. There's so many things you can do, but success doesn't come from doing so many things.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And making decisions on what to focus on, right? And and I think that should be based on the problem. How big is the problem, and how realistic is your solution for that problem, right? And so when we saw that 60% of Americans don't have access to trauma level 1 and 2, right? 5 billion people on this planet don't have access to safe and affordable surgery, right? According to the World Health Organization, we have to double the number of physicians we have by 2030 in order to fix this problem, right? So what does that require? That requires a way to give people in all over the world access to these unique training opportunities. I mean, in the States as well, like I said. I mean, you take something specific like someone having a stroke. I don't know if you're aware of this, but if you're having a stroke, then you have 15 minutes. Whoever's the person responding to the ambulance, they have 15 minutes to identify that you're having a stroke to administer the right medications and more importantly, to get you to the right hospital, right? Because if you get to a hospital that doesn't have a neurologist on staff, which would be a trauma level 1, right? Then you could die or have semi-paralysis, right? And so like we're already speaking with a company that owns Northern California. They own the majority of the ambulances in that region, because to where we could have our technology in the ambulance, so that we can actually allow one office with multiple neurologists that could remote in. Hey, move your hand, do this. Okay, this person's having a stroke. Take them to general whatever this location is. They need to speak. Like, think about how big of a problem that solves, right? So that's kind of it's important to do that when you're asking. Now about the technology, because of the fact that we are built our technology peer to peer, which means it doesn't, in traditional, like what we're doing right now, it's going to a server and it's getting transcoded to multiple languages for different devices. So for someone's Android, someone's PC, someone's iPhone, you get it, right? Our technology identifies in advance the language of the other, like whether it's an Oculus Go or some other headset, right? Even if it's a computer, right? And then it delivers it direct, right? That's how we can get the minimal latency down to 200 milliseconds, right? Now, in order to do this without ghosting that look like it's going like this, we have to do all of the processing on our end. So essentially it requires a very high-end processor, graphics card, so like a small all-in-one computer component, and then a like boom mic with a stereoscopic camera. It looks like 2 eyeballs that we lift whoever the sales rep. Sales reps are always at these surgeries when they're happening. In a lot of medical device sales, it's like a law that's for someone to be supervising it. So what they do is that person would lift the camera to eyeball level in that perfect piece of real estate wherever you'd want that physician to be. They log in, and with a few quick buttons, they're able to send a feed to multiple physicians, right? So in our most recent surgery, actually today, we had surgeons from Harvard and Cleveland Clinic and other places around the United States that were able to remote in and learn how to do a very unique surgery for eustachian tube dysfunction.
Wow, that is awesome. This can be used like worldwide, right? Like all they just need is the technology and a fast internet connection. And yeah, this is like a total disruptor. I actually used to work in a stroke center, and they had something similar to that, where they had like a physician, like a dial-up physician type cart. They would roll into the patient, but this is like next level stuff. I mean, you're taking this potentially right onto ambulances for essentially it's real-time care at the scene. It's crazy. That's awesome that you're doing that. And you have no healthcare like experience, like background. You're not trained in medicine or healthcare or anything like that, right? So
no, we do have a CMO
space.
But we do have someone who does. Of course, we have people on our team. Like I said, that's what I'm good at is realizing that is to find the right people and identify the people that believe in what we're doing and that are willing to commit and then just engaging them, right, and finding ways to work with them. And so when we were trying to find product market fit, from the first conversations we had with Johnson & Johnson as our customer, we're in a pilot with them. It was like a matter of weeks before we were given a vendor license, and it was because we had a strong internal champion who believed in our product. Dr. Dean we gave him a demo He done one of the first surgeries in Iraq about 14 years ago, and he was introduced from someone we work with at a company called Level Health. He immediately saw the vision, and he said, like, I've been waiting years for this technology and very committed, and so he's a firm believer. So it's like you definitely have to find people that, if you're not in that industry, you have to find people who are, and you really have to leverage that experience, right? And just focus on people, right? Because in reality, just like I said before, there's not money, right? There's not product. It's all people. And so it's like, as long as you understand how to communicate and engage people and connect with people, then you'll be all right. It is difficult, though, if you don't have that experience, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And so just sort of like a take-home message for the audience about that is, like, you don't have to be an expert in everything to start a business. You don't have to have experience in that area. You're essentially, the key is to surround yourself with the people that you need to create the success that you want. So if you don't have a skill in a certain area, then you go find somebody with that skill. So that way you can focus on what you're good at, which is clearly creating ideas and then forming the business and seeing everything to fruition. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Sometimes expertise gets in your way as well. Have you ever met anyone who's just so smart, but they get in their own way?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm. We had a couple of students in our anesthesia program that were unbelievably smart, but because they didn't have the people skills and they were so technically thinking that they didn't even finish school, which is crazy that somebody so intelligent wouldn't pass anesthesia school, but it's just because they didn't have the people skills and they got bogged down in the minute details of everything that they were doing.
Yep. Life's about EQ, not IQ. Even though IQ is so important, right? Because I find that there's like some number, I don't know what the number, 120, I don't know what, there's some number where like you probably should have at least this IQ to do well. But then and from there, it's all EQ, right? Is being aware of like, okay, what's happening right now, feeling it, and how can I, like, what does it mean about myself, or what do I need the next step? And if you can do that, then I think you can do anything really, what doesn't matter the industry it's in. And if it's like, I feel that I don't know enough about this, and then you know, okay, I can find that person instead of like, I'm just going to fake it till I make it type of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is what a lot of smart people do. Or I don't know enough to take action, right? Mm-hmm. You know, it's like you need to feel uncomfortable when you're not taking action, right? And then you listen. You need to learn to understand your intuition and these other things to know when you're doing the wrong things, right? And then guided by those outcomes that I talked about earlier. It's kind of, I mean, it's difficult to communicate, but I think that it's really, really important, especially at least for my job, right? If I was if I had a different role than CEO of the company, then yeah, I probably would have to have much more technical skills. And I do have, like, for instance, I'm an accountant by education, and I understand how to raise money, and I've learned about how to do a price round and what a Reg B looks like and all those aspects of it, how to put what type of marketing, understanding your sales lead. And I have my skill set. My partner has the technical background. And in reality, the side on the medical side is like, it's better that I almost feel like we've leveraged it at least as a benefit to us that we're not in that space, because that allows us to let our customers tell us what to make.
True. Yeah, that makes sense.
If I was a physician, I'd probably say, no, I know. I'd be myself again.
Yeah.
And so I'm open to hearing from, like, if you have input, anybody who tries, we take feedback and we analyze the feedback and we utilize that in order to make the best product for the people that are using it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's smart. That's what every business owner should do, is take the feedback that they're getting and actually act upon it. There's so many times where I see people who own businesses that get a customer complaint or something and they just blow it off and don't act on it at all. But if people are giving you feedback, like, that's how you thrive in business. That's how you succeed, is continuously solving the problem. If they're giving the feedback, that's because there's a problem with your product and you need to fix that problem and make it better. So yeah, that's great advice there. Yep.
Yeah, my second success was based on that. Like I said, I did well I was selling in the barbecue stuff that I was selling. I did well on it, not because I was really into barbecue, but because I realized that there are millions of reviews online, people getting feedback that those people weren't leveraging, but I was going to. And it allowed me to, like, literally get to hundreds. Like, every SKU I had, I would get to hundreds of sales per day usually within 6 months, from ideation to 100 sales a day. Right. And it was 100% based on the fact that I just made the product people wanted, because I listened to what they said, even though they weren't saying it to me, they were saying it publicly. Right. And so in our case, what we're doing now, We have feedback is so key. Every person who's ever done a demo of our technology has been asked very specific questions, 2 specific questions. All of our employees are trained the same way. We all know that like we're going to do an upfront contract with them before they get it, and like, hey, this is what to expect, and this is what I'd like to see if you're willing to give me answer 2 quick questions before, like, after your experience, and they do, right?
Yeah.
And then we keep track that information and we use that input.
Cool. Very, very good advice. I got a couple of questions. We're kind of approaching our end here. And so I want to be respectful of your time, but a couple of more questions I want to ask you real quick are, what's the current struggle that you have right now in your business, and what are you kind of doing to overcome that? And just kind of elaborate on that just a bit.
Yeah. So I'll say a big struggle. So after we debuted at Facebook, we got Perkins Coie, they're the main law firm for Amazon.com and Microsoft. There'd be a lot of these big companies, right? They identified us as like a startup with potential, and we sat down with their engineers and they looked at our IP and to see if we had defensible IP, and they thought we did. So they offered us like they front loaded all of our legal, did all of our Delaware C Corp, Silicon Valley Bank, set us up everything, put us in front of investors. We were getting offers when trying to raise money. But they all required us to move to Silicon Valley and to be there, right? And I have nothing against Silicon Valley. I actually love the people are quite intelligent, very open-minded. They're going to look for a reason why your technology or your idea will work, versus here, which is going to be, you'll get a lot of people that are naysayers or like come up with 20 reasons. It's natural, where we try to spend more focus on avoiding hurt and so it's natural that people are like that. And over there, it's a little bit different. But what I also noticed is that at an early stage, when you're only able to raise $1 to $2 million, then you are building a culture of people that are building their own products on the side, and they're not very committed, right? And so we made the difficult decision to turn down those offers and come back and to build our company in the place where we built the technology, right? And so we leveraged the fact that we had done our debut at Facebook headquarters, and that we did all this, and we had patent work in progress with one of the best law firms, et cetera. And we were fortunate enough to raise locally. So, and to get us to the next steps, find product market fit and keep on going. And it's always a struggle. But trying to stay here is probably something we struggle with. And it's like identifying the right investors, because it's how often, you get someone that's willing to invest, one of these larger VCs or PE firms or whatever, and it's like right away, like move out of where you are. And so I think, as a piece of advice, is that be ready when you're trying to raise money. Be okay with no, right? And know your decision of why you're deciding to stay where you are, if you are, right? In some cases, like for instance, if our technology was highly revolved around ML or something very specific that it's going to be very hard to make talent, then maybe over there is the right place, right? But every business model is different, right? Make a decision based on what's right for your company. Where do you want to grow your company? And don't let other people tell you where you need to be or what you need to do. If it doesn't align with that vision, right? Be aware. It's so weird because it's like a double-sided, like listen to what people are saying, but at the same time, you got to trust your intuition and know. And so in our case, our biggest struggle is identifying. I mean, we're pretty good. We're about 60% through on a $5 million raise. So we're excited to close it probably within the next 60 to 90 days. But finding investors that are okay with us being located in Florida is definitely been a challenge.
Great advice right there. So as a departing piece of advice, would you give anybody, do you have a tool that you recommend, a documentary, a book?
Yeah, I do. I have a book. So there's a book that we give to every one of our employees, right? It's called the New 1 Minute Manager. There's one called the 1 Minute Manager. There's the new is actually better than the other one. And it's I think it's a really good book. I think it's important that if you're going to hire people and build a culture, culture is everything. If you don't create a culture, it's going to create itself, and it's not going to be the one that's going to be that you're going to expect or want later on. And maybe you're successful. Maybe you come from a family that's already wealthy, and you can get friends and family, and they have connections, and it's easy to raise money and to get to the next steps. Or maybe you don't need to raise money because your business model is one that just scales without money, right? Whatever that scenario is, either way, you're going to need to hire people, because people make products, people make businesses happen, right? And if you don't create the right culture from the beginning, then you're going to fail. It's just simple, right? You can have a crappy product with a great culture and it'll work. Have the best product in the world with a crappy culture and you're going to fail. And so I think that figuring that out early, I personally found the book, The New 1 Minute Manager, a great tool on how to identify goals with your people, your team, how to grow this culture that you want. And I think that maybe that I recommend to anyone, but or anything like that. Just focus on culture and check out that book. See if that's the type of culture that you'd want for your teams.
Awesome, cool. So you heard it from the leading expert. The new 1 Minute Manager. Culture is vital to your success. So Erik, I just wanted to say thanks. We've kind of approached our time limit here. I wanted to say thanks for joining us on the call. You've provided a ton of information. I wish you the most success, continued success. You're crushing it, and you're going to be changing lives for sure with your technology. Just a real quick departing reminder on if anybody who's interested. I know we have a lot of CRNAs who will be watching this who directly in the OR. So if they want to check out more about the technology, about you, they should go to where?
They should go to Immertec, IMMERTEC.com, right? And then questions, just any question. We want to hear from you. And we'll respond pretty quickly, usually in 24 to 48 hours. And we'd love to give you a demo just to learn more about if anything that we said today resonates with you, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And we will sign off here. I hope you guys enjoyed the show.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Erik from Immertec. We'll talk to you later.
Take care. Thanks.